Hello everyone. We've just been discussing the fact that we don't have a diocesan host in this meeting, so Paul's obviously very confident in our IT skills. A few people coming in, so we're working on it.
So our screen's really dirty.
I am just going to mute everybody for our presentation, and then hopefully we should have 5 minutes at the end if we've got any quick questions. But you put anything in the chat if you want to. We'll
Okay. It's the same thing every time.
No, I do the same thing, but it's like
Sorry, I hadn't realised I'd muted myself.
I possibly did that, Heather, just now. Okay.
I can see Sylvia. Hello.
All right. So we've got 15 people in. Shall we make a start, Heather, do you think?
Okay, yeah.
Let me just make sure everybody's muted. Just before we do start, I just need to mention that the session is being recorded because they're going to be put up onto Hoover so that people can watch afterwards. You can go back and watch again if you want to. We're doing 2 sessions that will be exactly the same, and I'll make some sort of judgment based on which one's better than the other one. So it may be this one that might go online. So if you want to not be on camera, feel free to turn your camera off. That's absolutely fine. And what I'm going to do is crop the recording so it just has kind of from when we actually start, so from when Heather actually starts. So I'm going to share the screen. And hopefully you'll still be able to see us too. Okay, over to you, Heather.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's I hope you're having a good conference with not any IT glitches. It seems to be going very well at my end anyway, so I hope it is with you as well. Thanks for choosing this session. I hope you find it inspiring and helpful. Myself and Sarah have done this session a number of times. I have to say it's one of my favourite because it's all about giving churches confidence to grasp tourist and visitor opportunities, and it's all about looking at how to make it easier for churches and what they can do. Could I have the next slide, please, Sarah? Thank you. Just a little bit about us. I'm part of Ecclesiastical. I'm the church insurance consultant with the group, and part of that is about supporting our church parishes at ground level and providing training. We're owned by the Benefact Trust, which some of you might have known in before it was the Benefact Trust was All Churches Trust. So that's one of the things I love about working for Ecclesiastical, because it's about all the available profits that we make go to the trust, who then can give out grants to charities and churches. So as part of this open church talk today, you might come up with some project that you think actually we could do with some funding for that. Do go and have a look on the Benefact Trust website and see if your project is meets their eligibility criteria. Next slide, I think. Do I hand over to you now, Sarah? I think so. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Hello everyone, so my name's Sarah Crossland. I'm the engagement manager at the National Churches Trust, but my specialism is in church tourism, We as a trust, you may or may not have heard of us, don't worry if you haven't, but we are all about helping to sustain church buildings and helping you to care for them and to promote them. So we provide grants for repairs, maintenance, facilities, but we also offer advice, guidance, training, and we also try to kind of communicate the value and the amazingness of our churches. So we do that through our tourism work, but also wider kind of comms and PR and that kind of thing about churches. And we work with Ecclesiastical quite a lot. And this is a brilliant session because much as I can talk about the amazingness of opening your church and people coming in, actually when it gets down to the nitty-gritty of it, you need to know that you're supported by people like Ecclesiastical. Back to you, Heather.
Thank you. So let me just start with a few myths and hopefully bust those myths. We're often asked, or we're often told by our customers that we're not insured if we leave our church open. And that's absolutely not the case as long as there are some precautions taken. So just to say, I'm talking from an ecclesiastical point of view here. So if you're insured with another insurer, they may take a different view. But for us, no, you're absolutely insured as long as there's precautions taken. Everything has to be locked away. Again, not the case, but it's about common sense. So if you've got high value items, then it's sensible to put those locked away. If the worst comes to the worst and something is stolen, you're covered. So you've got that comfort. Somebody has to be on the premises when it's open. No, they don't. Very few churches have got vast numbers of volunteers that they can call upon. And I'll talk about this a little bit later in the slide. Just think about other opportunities of being able to keep your eye on the church if you haven't got those volunteers who can sit in there for you. We're looking for trouble if we leave it open. Absolutely not. Our churches are there for mission and to serve their communities, and so they should be open. They should be open for people to experience something of God, or it might be that they go in, excuse me, to enjoy the history and the architecture that our church buildings have. People might go in and to use it as a place of safety and sanctuary, or a place of hospitality. And whenever I go to church and see that church door locked, what is that saying about our church buildings? From my viewpoint, it's saying the church building belongs to the PCC, and the PCC will choose when they open it and allow people to go in. And remember that most visitors to churches are legitimate, and the benefits for opening your church can be life-changing. So to help you think about how you can manage opening your church, we've created a 6-step approach. And if I could have the next slide, please, Sarah, that'd be great. Thank you. So step 1, utilise people. As I said, you may not have hordes of volunteers that you can draw upon, but are there activities that are already happening in your church? For example, grass cutting, cleaning, flower arranging. Can you open your church at those points so that you're not putting additional burden on volunteers? Or maybe there's other groups that are using it. And the beauty of other groups almost taking on that custodian and watching brief, it creates a sense of wider ownership and belonging, so people will want to help you look after that building. But does the location in itself offer opportunities? It might be on a walking route or a cycling route, and you can offer refreshments. One talk I went to, I heard that apparently cyclists are the biggest spenders because they haven't got any means of carrying things, so they tend to use cafes a lot. Is it on a school route where, you know, people taking their children to and from school? Can you open the door as part of your ministry of hospitality to offer coffee and a chat? And build relationships up with neighbours and use them as human CCTV. But if you are going to open your church, let them know that the church will be open so that they can keep their eyes out and that they know who to report any suspicious behaviour to. If you are having work done, let the church, let those neighbours know. We had a church in West Yorkshire where the lead was stripped over a couple of days. The neighbours thought it was legit because the guy was wearing a high-vis jacket. But also, if users of the church are using the church on a particular day when that church is going to be open, make sure they know. Again, we had a very expensive carpet rolled up and taken away by guys who come in a white jacket, who told the choir that they were taking the carpet away for cleaning, which they weren't doing. Next slide, please. As I said earlier on, remove temptation. So things that are possibly of high value, lock them away. Can you replace, for example, if you've got an expensive, elaborate cross, whilst the church is open, could that be replaced by a wooden cross or similar? For larger items, the picture there is of Mouseman furniture. Can you hide the mouse either by turning the furniture around when the church is open, or make the building work for you? So sometimes churches will have an external door and a lobby door, 2 doors on each, where they can open alternatively to make it actually difficult to get furniture in and out. There might be items that you do need to bolt down or screw down, things like AV equipment, which is absolutely fine and the sensible thing to do, but just think about any faculty requirements and implications for historic fabric before you start nailing things into a medieval piece of furniture. Thank you, Sarah. Next slide, please. Thank you. Again, it's about deterring. So make it look as if people are in the building, whether they're there or not. So playing music, either piped music or organ music, can be really helpful. In my own church, we have a really conscientious organist who practices regularly, and you can hear that organ from quite a long way. So people will know that there's somebody in there. Lighting can be really helpful to deter, but it's also helpful for safety as well as security, especially if you've got steps going down to the church, just to light those up to prevent potential notices, which can be really helpful, but just think about it from a welcome point of view and make sure those notices aren't off-putting. You'll see on the screen we've got the smart water signage there, and just to say that again, if you're an ecclesiastical customer, you do need to have that smart water signage up, that forensic marking, because without that you're not covered for theft of metal. And the signs really do act as a deterrent because thieves don't want to get caught. Next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you. Reducing arson. Just have a look around your church and just look at anything that could be used to start a fire and make sure they're securely locked away. Most churches have it might be useful one day pile or bit of a room. Just if you do, just remember to remove all the combustibles. Don't make it easy for an arsonist to start a fire. Candles, think really carefully about how candles are used. We would suggest that they're not left unlit, they're not left lit and unattended on the premises. But of course, people like to go into a church to light a candle. So where candles are in use, make sure they're extinguished before you lock up. And make sure you're using a decent metal candle stand and you've got proper holders and the wax is cleared away regularly. And you could look at alternatives, maybe leaving a pen and paper so that people can leave prayers for them to be said at the next service. Next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you. recovery obviously is an important thing to think about, that should the worst happen, like as if things are stolen, your policy will cover you for a replacement. It will be a modern day replacement. But having an up-to-date inventory really is helpful in terms of recovering items and helping you put your claim together. And it's much easier to recover items where they're photographed. And that in itself can be an opportunity for mission. So working with volunteers, maybe schools and colleges, to create that, the photographs of those important parts of the church. If things are stolen or damaged, again, photographs are really helpful, because it then enables craftsmen to recreate items. And I have to say, having seen some of the things that have been replaced in some of our churches where things have been stolen, or where there's been an arson attack, because there's been photographs in place, it's been remarkable, the likeness of what's been put back in. Next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you. It's about making it safe. So again, under your policy, you do have public liability cover if somebody injures themselves whilst visiting your church. Now, the most common injury we have in terms of claims is slips and trips. So do review your health and safety arrangements, and that doesn't mean reams and reams of paperwork. Again, it's about common sense. Go around your church with a fresh pair of eyes as a visitor. We'll do it in our church, and I do it in my own church. I know where the tripping hazards are. I know where that wonky step is. Visitors don't necessarily know their way around our churches in the same way, so look at it from a stranger's point of view, and also think about it from the point of view of somebody who might have lesser mobility, or they might, from a child, there'll be different hazards for them. That last point is the fire risk assessment, and just to say, make sure you review that, and it's the one risk assessment by law that needs to be in place. Next slide, please, Sarah. Think about your personal safety plan, and I would just direct you to our Ecclesiastical website just to get more information about personal safety. But again, it's a personal safety plan, so you need to think of it from the particular person, and it could change depending on whose needs you're looking at. Like I said, go onto our website to have a look in more detail in that. Next slide, please, Sarah. So the key messages I really want to give you is, we're here to support and enable churches to carry out their mission. There's lots of resources you can look at on our website, and we've got that expertise to help you do that. But be confident and courageous that you will be insured if you take the steps that I've gone through here. You are insured. There are resources available. I'm here to support you. You can always contact me if you want any further guidance, or if you wanted me to come out and take a review of your church with you. We're here to help you. Don't use, and again, I would say, if this is the only thing you remember from my bit of this presentation, don't use insurance as an excuse not to open. As a church, your job is God's mission. Our job is to be there if things don't quite go to plan, and we're there to support you in that respect. Now I'm going to hand you over to Sarah for her pearls of wisdom on welcoming people into the church building.
Thank you, Heather. That was fab, thank you. Just a quick note. My slides are quite crammed with some information. I'm not going to read out everything that's on them, but you will have access to them afterwards. They'll be in our booth. If you want them, you can email me and ask for them. And they are the full slides from this presentation and then a load of links from Heather. So they link really well to the Ecclesiastical website and all the advice there. And the other quick thing is that both of us do this either as an hour-long presentation each, or we can do it as an hour-long presentation between us. And those training sessions are usually advertised on our website, but if you follow us on social or anything like that, then you'll find out about them. So I'm going to do a quick whiz through welcoming visitors. So first of all, why do this? What's tourism worth? So as a sector, it's worth a huge amount to our economy. And heritage is one of the biggest drivers of tourism, particularly of day visits, and it's growing. You might be surprised to know, particularly those of you from Manchester with your two huge football clubs, that more people visit heritage sites at the weekend than attend football matches, which I think is an absolutely brilliant statistic. And there are opportunities there for us. You know, each of your churches is unique. You all have something to offer. We've got some amazing stories and there are some brilliant welcomes out there. Obviously, as Heather said, the Christian ethos is to be hospitable. And we talk a lot about kind of the ministry of welcome, and that opening for visitors is more than just heritage or tourism. It's bringing your church to life for people and for new people. And it's about kind of offering a consistent welcome to everybody, whether they come to services or not. Sorting out kind of how you welcome visitors can also help you welcome people who come on a Sunday morning and vice versa. Why now then? I guess we've thought a lot about COVID over the last 2 years, but one thing that has changed with COVID and has remained, actually, you know, things could have gone to how they were, gone back to how they were before, but the big travel trends prior to COVID were things like experiences and travel like a local. So people talked about, you know, going to Thailand and eating street food, that kind of thing. Post-COVID, and actually through the pandemic, people started to live like a tourist. They walked more in their local area. They used local suppliers, and that has continued. So we've still seen a huge boom in, you know, holidaying within the UK. People are more interested still in sustainable and responsible travel. That, along with the climate change agenda, has meant that people might travel less, but they want to get more out of it when they do. So I think there's a real opportunity for us, both in welcoming more local people through the door, who could then turn into long-term either people involved with the church or new members of your congregation, and people from afar while they're visiting places across the UK. Why do we do this as NCT is always a question that I get asked. And actually for us, it's not just about increasing the number of people who cross the threshold. Yes, that's great. And yes, we would love to know how many people visit churches, because really we don't know. It's kind of a hidden number. But it's about actually what those visitors can do for you. So you can raise income from visitors in various ways. And you can use that income then to support the wider services that you offer. So they might be community services, they might be food banks or yoga classes, or all sorts that might happen in the church. And we know that that's, you know, wide and varied. But the kind of income that comes from tourists can help you to sustain those other services. Now, I'm going to talk very briefly about a few kind of tips and tricks, what to think about before people arrive and then once they are at your church. So before arriving, your welcome starts as soon as that person either decides they want to come to your church specifically, or is perhaps just researching an area to visit, or knows that they're coming to a wedding, or they're coming to visit their grandma or whatever. Your welcome starts as soon as somebody sees something about the church, so before they get anywhere near you. 70% of travellers we know research places to visit on their smartphones. So be aware of that, and think about your digital presence, and that includes obviously your website, and there are some key things with your website. I am always saying this in training sessions, Heather's heard me say this a million times, but do check your website and make sure you've got the essentials on there. So the address of the church, you'd be surprised how often the address of the church is not on a website, because I think the person that set up the website generally thinks that people know where the church is because they might be the congregation that generally use that site. So make sure the address is on there, and make sure your opening times are on there. So you may know that your church is open 24/7, and assume that most of other churches are. Unfortunately, they aren't. And a general visitor out there who perhaps isn't part of kind of church structure won't assume that church buildings are open. So make sure that your opening times are kind of loud and proud on the website. Make sure your social media is good, that your content is changing and that it's relevant and that it has some content on there for visitors. Make sure that your sort of your bios and your descriptions and your photographs and all that are kind of the best they can be. Look at your presence elsewhere. So you might want to look to see if people have reviewed your church on places like TripAdvisor, and they can do that without you having set up your church as a venue. Also on Google, so check your entry on Google Maps. You can claim that entry, and then you can start responding to reviews, and you can look at pictures that people have posted. We went around Lincolnshire and took some 360-degree photos with a camera, posted them on Google Maps, and they've had literally tens of thousands of views in 6 months. So Google Maps is a great place to put your content. You know, it's the kind of the idea of putting the information that you have where people already go, not assuming that they're going to come to your website. You might also want to look at our website. We have church listings on our website, probably about 4,000 odd now, so we've got a really good map, and you can register to add your church to the website. One thing you can really, what's really beneficial for you to do is kind of think about all of these things and your church building from a stranger's point of view. So try and sort of step back, visit each like a stranger, and think about what people will find and how they might view what the content is that's already there. So thinking about arriving then, how easy is it to actually find the church, either by intention or by accident? So quite often, I mean, we do a lot of rural walking, and quite often you can see a church in the distance. But sometimes, even when you get into the smallest villages, they disappear. They disappear behind other buildings, and you can't always find where they are. And you can't even see something like church road signs or, that kind of thing. And so think about potential signage. You might also want to think about signage of things like walking paths or cycle routes, as Heather mentioned. You could offer the churches somewhere to come and sit when it's raining, or come and sit and have your lunch if you're on a long walk, but put some little notices by footpath signs and that kind of thing. Outside is the first place that people will see. So think about it, it's kind of like curb appeal, if you're trying to sell your house. So think about how it looks, and think about how it'll look in photographs as well. Remember that access and widening access is not just about wheelchairs. It might be about parents with pushchairs. It might be people with sight or hearing difficulties. So try and think kind of holistically about the building and how somebody will come in. Again, don't forget about outside. Your churchyard or your garden is no doubt an amazing space. There's a huge number of resources on the Caring for God's Acre website about kind of interpreting your churchyard. So have a look at that. But the basics are kind of making it look cared for, and that doesn't mean that you have to keep the grass short everywhere. But just, make sure it's neat and tidy, make sure the paths are accessible. And also, can you use it to tell your story? So are there any interesting people buried there? Can you link them to perhaps houses in the village? Can you tell the stories of those people? Once people get inside then, think about a welcome board, maybe a designated area for information, for visitor information. You can think about storytelling. That might be through leaflets or panels, or you might have seen those paddles that people carry around in a building and then leave, or you could use something like QR codes or digital interpretation. You could use QR codes to take people to pages on your website which have more information. But remember, those pages on your website could also have maybe some audio or some video. Most people do what's called bring your own device now, so they will have a smartphone in their pocket, or they might have an iPad in the car or something like that, so they can access this information actually while they're in the building. If you don't have Wi-Fi, or you don't have a very good signal in the building, there are ways around that, and I'm happy to talk about that if you want me to. Always have a visitor book and a pen, or several pens, because I am terrible for picking up pens, signing the book and then putting it in my pocket and getting outside thinking I've still got the pen in my pocket and having to go back in. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure some people walk away with the pen. But try and put the visitor book somewhere where it's really obvious, and maybe even a sign next to it and a kind of, please sign our visitor's book. It's really, really helpful to know how many people are coming into your church. You can use those numbers on funding for applications, all sorts of things. Sorry, applications for funding, completely the wrong way around. Think about, maybe you could provide a refreshments area. Yes, you could have volunteers in the church who are offering tea, coffee, cake, all those kind of things. But you could also just provide a little area, a tray, kettle, some tea bags, even some biscuits, and say, make yourself a cup of tea, leave us a donation. That works very successfully in a lot of rural churches, particularly thinking back to those ones that are on walking routes or cycle routes. It works really, really well. Most importantly, really show off your good side. Churches are amazing. So make sure you're clean and tidy, maybe smell of polish or something like that. You might think about soft music and lighting. Think about how you create that lovely atmosphere when people walk in. Make sure the best and most important features in the building can be seen, so they're not hidden behind chairs or ladders or anything like that. I know it's really tough for churches. They weren't built with storage in mind, so you may have freestanding chairs, you may have all their flower buckets, all that kind of thing, but make sure that they're out of the way, and make sure that people can take good photographs, and encourage them to do so and to share on social media. When it comes to visitors themselves, you don't need to be an expert. It's great to meet and greet visitors. Absolutely brilliant. Shows the warm human side of the church, and that's fantastic. But you don't need to be an expert in the heritage of the building or in the stories of all the people mentioned in the windows. Just make people feel welcome. Give them space to choose how they want to explore. Some may just want to wander around. Some may want to read every detail of every panel or every leaflet. Some may want to ask questions. It's absolutely fine for you to have a folder with all the information in it, and to take them through that if they ask you something that you don't know. Remember that people come for lots of different reasons, and actually with coming into churches, they can't always articulate why they come in, or even how something might impact them when they're in the building. It is always good to have kind of a quiet area for prayer, particularly if you're a large church, or maybe if you've got a kind of really active event going on, so you might have an open day or kids activities in the church or whatever, something like that. It's nice to kind of set aside a quiet area. You might want to use something like prayer cards or stones in a bowl or candles or a prayer tree. It's done in lots of different ways in lots of churches, and lots of great examples out there. Just find something that works for you and for your visitors. Interestingly, it's also a good way to count visitors. So maybe the number of prayer cards that are filled in or stones that are in the bowl, that kind of thing. You can count visitors using that as well. You might want to provide, whether it's Bibles or kids' books or all sorts of things, for people to actually sit down and spend some time in the building. And always make sure that your contact details are around, or somebody's contact details are around and clearly easy to find in case somebody does actually need to speak to somebody. As I mentioned earlier on, visitor numbers are really important. They're really important to you. They're also really important to us. We are trying to promote the value of churches, the love of churches. You might have seen recently we produced a report called The House of Good, which was about the economic value of churches. We've run recently 2 big tourism projects with Visit England and Visit Wales that have been very successful. And we can do those things by proving that people visit churches and that they value them and that they provide services to the community. As I said, though, we actually don't know how many people overall visit churches. There are huge numbers of stats out there that all say different things. So we are currently scoping a project called the Great Church Visitor Count. I think at the moment we're looking at doing something a bit like the butterfly count, where over one weekend we ask churches to all count their visitors. But we'll see. It should be something that we do next year. What we do know is that however many people sign your visitors book, way more actually visit the church. So we did a relatively small scale study in Lincolnshire, and we were expecting probably 5 or 10 times as many people sign the visitors book as actually, come in as actually sign the visitors book. And they are certainly multipliers that are used by organisations like the Churches Conservation Trust. They use 7 times. When we did some research, we found it's more like 15 times, or even in some churches, we got 50 times as many visitors as signed the book. So it's many, many more. And as I said, those numbers can help you to apply for funding. They can prove your engagement with the community. You know, they can be enormously helpful to you. I'll skim through that one. That's it from me. So yeah, just to say that you will this slides afterwards, so don't worry if you haven't made notes. But I think we've actually ended up with a bit of time for questions, Heather. We've got about 10 minutes. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's see if anybody's got any questions. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? You want to wave a hand or any comments or thoughts about anything that we've said? Paul. Hello.
Hi, my church is Holy Trinity Dub Cross, and we're open every day.
Fantastic.
And basically, the message I would give is be confident. We talk to Ecclesiastical. We put our brasses away every Sunday in the vestry. Things are locked away in the vestry area, and we get people in who drop into church. You can be there doing a job, and maybe you'll see 1 or 2 people who are out walking. We're in a conservation area, which helps, so people pick us up on the route. But basically, my message would be do it. Don't find ways to not do it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think we found, didn't we, during COVID, so when the first lockdown hit and churches were told that they had to close and lock the doors, there's an organisation called the Centre for Christianity and Culture within the University of York, and they pretty quickly started to look at the impact that had. There's a really good website called Churches and COVID, and they did pretty extensive research of the general public, volunteers and clergy to look at the impact that closing had, and found that there are, I mean, this is nothing new to churches that are open, but there are a huge number of people who use churches that nobody knows anything about. So they pop in on a Tuesday morning as they're walking their dog, and they might sit there for, their 15 minutes of quiet time, and they do that, excuse the pun, religiously every week. But nobody knows that they're there because nobody sees them go in, nobody comes out. They don't sign the visitors book because they don't feel like visitors. And for those people, locking the churches had a huge impact. So, just think about kind of all those people that are out there in your communities. If your church is locked, that could be using your church, could be benefiting from that space.
And it also gives, we have a church room at the back. As you enter, you end up in the room. We have a food bank there, which is at the moment is being filled up regularly. We have a book exchange. scheme. We have people dropping in used stamps for mercy ships. We have an eco thing where people are dropping batteries, use batteries in rather than putting them in their bins. So yeah, so you can open up things that mean you get people other than your regular congregation who actually come into the church, which is the first step, really.
Yeah, and it's almost, I mean, it's almost going back to, you know, what churches were like when they were built in medieval times, right? So they're centres for the community, and the space is used for lots of different things. And if you can have things like you say, like a book swap or whatever it is that you find is right for your local community, to just encourage people to pop in and to just feel like it's their space as well. That's absolutely brilliant. And then, you know, I hope you won't have to, but if you need a new roof in 5 years, you've built up that kind of community goodwill as well.
That was 20 years ago.
Any other comments or thoughts or questions? Or I think we've stunned everybody, Heather.
Yeah, quite. Can we do a poll? It would just be interesting to know how many of you do open your church like Paul. It would be interesting to know.
There is actually, I did set up a poll in the session. So if you go into the chat for the session, there is a poll. And I did a kind of, we're open every day, we're open every week, we're open occasionally, we're not open, I think. Variations on that. So I don't think you can, I think you can fill that in completely anonymously. I think we'll just be able to see kind of, you know, a variation of stats. So it's just a checkbox where you choose one.
Sarah, just to say, those of us who've got more than one church, your poll will need to be filled in more than once.
That's very true. Yes.
And you didn't seem to have an option for 0.5. Just to say, my small church in the appalling area is open a lot more than my big church in the posh area.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it's nothing to do with
interesting.
risk.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with risk. It's all to do with perception.
Yeah. And do you mean the perception of who might come in, or the perception of who the church belongs to?
No, in the rich church, the large church, which potentially has more volunteers, the perception is, oh my goodness, people are going to come in and nick stuff. There's a school next door. Whereas in the poor church, in the dreadful area, the perception is, well, there's not that much worth nicking anyway, but they can come into the church if they want, and they can pick up the peace of God there. The church is for everybody, etc., etc. It's a different mindset, and with that different mindset, success breeds success. More people come in because it's open, and more people then come in because they've been in the past and invite their friends. You know, it's wonderful.
Yeah,
it's the perception. I don't know how to get past that.
Have you ever got them together to talk to each other about it?
I'm glad you've asked that question. That's a good question. That question needs to be asked. Thank you for your question. I try.
Yeah.
Periodically.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? You know, we've done a lot of work with rural churches, particularly think about, you know, tend to be open more, let's say. Actually, we find it's the suburban ones that are more difficult. You know, ones in town centres tend to be open, rural ones tend to be open.
To be fair, the school next door is pretty rough. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I don't think the risk is having the school next door. The risk is being invisible because you're never open.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just come in. I mean, from an insurance point of view, I mean, we do get claims for things that happen when a church is open, but it isn't our biggest concern. You know, it's the claims we have are minimal, really, and I think you're right, Paul. I think it is that perception and that worry that people have, and it can often that worry can often stem from, we had an incident 20 years ago, and that often it becomes folklore then, doesn't it? We can't possibly open again because we had an incident 20 years ago. Well, as an insurer, we're, as I said in my bit of the presentation, we're there to support when it goes wrong. That's why people insure. That's why you've got your insurance. You pay your insurance premium. It's there to hopefully offer some comfort that if things do go wrong, that we're there. But like I said, you know, we're not inundated with claims of theft when churches are open. In fact, quite the opposite. The fact that a church is open can have a really positive effect on security, because would-be thieves will be worried that somebody will come in and catch them in the act, and they don't want to be caught.
And it doesn't have to be complicated either, you know. Even when you think about interpretation and telling your stories, it doesn't have to be complicated. And I would always advocate for starting small, starting inexpensive. You know, a few printed sheets around the church that explain what various things are and their relevance to the building and their relevance to the community, and see how people interact with them, you know, and see what they ask more questions about, see what they want to know more about, see where they spend more time, and then perhaps think about more complicated or more expensive, let's say, storytelling. There's lots of ways to do digital storytelling now, and you know, QR codes. We're all used to scanning QR codes now, aren't we? After the last, you know, particularly in 2020, you know. So if you can use QR codes to go to pages on your website, you can change a page on your website every minute of every day if you so choose to. So it's easy to keep up to date, easy to add more information to. You could even do, I've worked with one church that did super tasteful QR codes on like oak blocks, so they looked a bit like dice, and they sit on windowsills and things like that. One thing you do have to do though is make sure that people see them, that they're not that tasteful that they blend in. But yeah, you know, you can do things that are really lovely, that just take you to a place, a website or whatever that you can adapt.
After my digression, how do you want me to fill in your little poll?
Okay, I don't know whether the technology will allow you to fill it in more than once, because I can't fill it in because I set it up. If you can fill it in more than once, please do so.
I'll try.
If the technology will let you. Otherwise, let's be positive. Tell me about the open church.
Just an observation, if I may. And firstly, thank you, Sarah, for answering my question that I typed up earlier today. The church that I'm an assistant curate, so I'm an interloper, as it were. But the church that I'm serving in is an old mission church, the big church, the very beautiful church, closed down about 5 years ago, sadly. And so this little mission church it's nothing special. Nobody's going to want to go there because there's something of particular importance from a heritage perspective. But it is a very beautiful church inside, and it is a very holy place, a very prayerful place. And it's surrounded by very, very big lawns, but it's always gated and always locked. So people can't actually get into the actual grounds themselves. But I have noticed people have found ways around that. So I know that a neighbor who lives over the wall has thrown over his son's football posts, and that they have a way of getting over to play football in the lawn, and not everyone's happy about this. And there are some young people as well who have decided it's worth scaling the fence to just go and sit in the lawns at night and eat takeaway and socialize, and then leave all their litter. I was just wondering, we've spoken a lot about the churches themselves, but not really the spaces outside of them, and whether that's also an area worth looking at, exploiting, if you like, or opening up to the community, saying, look, use this place, use this space, rather than trying to keep people out. Because I think, the gate always being locked is also a sign saying that you're not welcome here unless you're part of this church.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that churchyards it's easy to think about the church as the building and not the ground around it as well. Regardless of what that ground contains, you know, so how many graves might be there, or if the stones have been moved to the side or not, or if you want a little area for nature or whatever. You know, there's so much that you could do in the churchyard, and I think making that space a welcoming one by not locking the gates and inviting people in, potentially, Heather will tell me if I'm wrong or right, but works in the same way as the church building. You know, people might do less damage if they feel like actually it's a space that lots of people are using. You know, what about bins? If you put bins in, would they actually put that, you know, have they got somewhere to put the rubbish? I'm in the middle of doing our National Church Awards, which you may or may not have heard of. But one church that is a finalist in 2 of the categories is Bournemouth St Peter. They've got huge churchyards, so it's about 3 acres. And they had an area of the churchyard which was used by rough sleepers and all sorts of other things kind of going on it across these 3 acres. So they set up a huge project working with vulnerable people, with the homeless, with the church community, and with the Wildlife Trust, to do a lot of work actually in the churchyard. So a lot of clearing of brush and, you know, all that kind of thing. So they actually feel like they've created this space, but now they put in interpretation in the churchyard because the church is not always open, so the storytelling's outside. They put picnic benches in there, you know, and they really encourage people to come in and use the space. So maybe something like that, maybe actually put some, you know, some bins and some benches might encourage them to feel like it's their space, and so they may then take care of it.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I'm just aware that it's 25 to, and we've got another webinar that we all probably need to be in, which is a shame because it's a really interesting conversation.
Okay, well, I welcome you all to come along to one of our longer training sessions. Have a look at the NCT website, which you'll see linked to from our booth. And I'll be listing more training sessions over the next 2 weeks. So just have a look at it in a couple of weeks' time and there'll be loads more on there.
Thanks, everyone. It's been lovely seeing you all. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.